We have free choice. We have free will. However, God's plan was simple. I'm going to create a beginning, and I'm going to decide an end, and everything in between I'm going to be aware of, and I'm going to, after I create that beginning and start it, I create a computer program, and I now can anticipate, based on the rules of the program, everything that's going to happen going forward. Now, I know where the program ends because I watched it play out in my imagination. And I'm so intelligent, I can see a chess game a million moves ahead. Billions and billions of possibilities. I can see it all because I'm that intelligent. That's how smart God is. So he ran through it all and saw it all. And he saw that it was good. And so he let it be by speaking it into being. And he watched it all unfold. Now, just because he watched it unfold and saw that it was good does not mean that he dictated each thing that happened. That was dictated by our free will. So our free will was never taken. It was only anticipated and sometimes steered on a couple things to make sure it leads to the desired outcome. So God only interferes if he needs to give little course corrections on some bigger macro level items in order to lead the ship to the desired location. So God is merely a man sitting in a pirate ship, steering the ship wheel, making sure it's still on course for the desired landing point of the ship. He doesn't micromanage every little thing so that there's no variation and no free will. He just makes small corrections to the overall course in order to prevent certain things that he's like, okay, I got to step in here. This is getting a little out of hand. When people became so dumb in the time of Noah, and everyone was complete savages that lost their minds, God took a dog that had rabies, foaming at the mouth, attacking everyone around it, and put it out of its misery because everyone was suffering so bad. It was a mercy killing. He did it quickly with a vast flood that was painless because the force of it knocked them out unconscious and they drowned instantly. Death by drowning is not very painful. It's just scary. But that scare could have put the fear of God into them, which is the beginning of wisdom. So in the afterlife, as they think about what a fool they were as a living human being, they're eventually in this place of darkness, weeping and gnashing of teeth, going to come to the realization, man, I was an idiot. As they have all this time to think, they have no body, and yet they're a man, a living soul with no body at this point. And they're going to have all this time to think about what a fool they were. And then Jesus dies and goes down to the people from the time of Noah and preaches to them in Hades and gives them some more enlightenment. Now, some of them are immediately going to become enlightened and follow Jesus, and they're going to join him in heaven. Some are going to say, I don't know who this whack dude is talking to me, but I'm still confused on things, and I need to stay by myself in darkness and just still try to work this all out. Once they start to figure out that God is good and he's real and he actually loves them, and they start to get understanding and fear God as their creator, then their mind starts to open up, they become enlightened, and then they join God in heaven. So, was God evil when he did the flood? No, he was mercifully killing them. But the killing was painless as taking out a rabid dog. Noah and his family were the only ones with any decency anymore. They were the only ones that did anything good for one another. Once people get too wicked and everyone's too stupid to see it, that nobody now has any decency, it's time to take some people out in God's sight. Now, I'm not saying that's my job. I'm saying that God's going to make a course correction as the captain of the ship, and I'm not wise enough to make that decision per se. Although if God told me to do it, I would have to, as God told the Israelites to do it. They had to. But I don't believe we're in a dispensation where the people of God are now killing people who are so dumb and so destructive that they're all living in an existence of utter misery. I believe now people are enlightened enough nowadays to where we're now not needing to be put out of our misery. But we're heading for a day called Armageddon where people become so evil and stupid again, because stupidity begets being bad to one another is what that means, that eventually God's going to have to take us out of our misery once more as a mercy killing because we're all so miserable. He wants us to become free of that misery. His goal is for us to have pleasure to the maximum. So because we're not feeling pleasure and we are too stupid to figure out how to feel any pleasure, which is to do good to one another and be good to ourselves, because we're too stupid to figure that out, he has to kill us at some point. Now, we're at a pretty good place in time with relative peace on earth compared to some of the other times. So right now, there's no need to wipe us all out, which is why we don't have major famines, wars, etc. We're relatively in a fairly decent spot, historically speaking, right now. So God's not doing any major judgments. But if we get dumb enough to where all we do is harm everyone and ourselves in so doing, then God needs to step in out of love for us because he has compassion. When everyone becomes so evil, then everyone lives in utter fear and hides in their house in terror. And it's horrible. And God has mercy and says, okay, people need to be taken out. Let's get some people that have some decency and some common sense. Take out everybody else and just leave the ones with common sense. And that's what God does. It's called a purging of stupidity. That's what God's judgments are. Every time God does a judgment, he's purging out stupid people that are causing themselves and everyone else displeasure. God's maximum goal is to provide maximum pleasure for his creation because he loves us. Basically, God's plan was, here's the start and here's the finish, and I'm going to make sure it steers the path to there. Everything that happens in between is because of our own free will, aside from the places where he feels he has to step in. A lot of the times he's not going to step in so that we reap what we sow, which is a rule. He wants us to learn from our mistakes, so he lets us bump our head. If we're going to act like an idiot and run around with our eyes closed, we're going to bump our head on walls sometimes. Then we're going to scream at God as an utter idiot that we are and say, God, you made me hit my head. So, yes, a good father is going to let their child make their own mistakes and make their own decisions at times. And sometimes when they see they're being so dumb, they're either going to, in this case, put an end to their misery by just quickly taking them out and causing them to stop harming everybody by pulling. They don't actually die. Nobody actually dies. Everyone just gets set in a corner to think about how dumb they're being. That's called hell, and it's temporary. Once you're realizing what you did wrong, you join God in heaven in utopia. So there is no actual death. It's just a death of your physical body. You're not a physical being. You're an eternal being with the earth suit. So all he did is take off your outfit and put you in timeout for being bad. He took you away from the other kids because you're harming everyone. So does God kill? No, he gives us timeouts and strips us of our earth suit. That's a more accurate way to say it for somebody that's wise and knowing, which I claim to be only by God's grace, and I could be wrong. I might be a complete fool. And I'm open to correction. If you can show me correction, I appreciate that, because I want to be corrected if I'm wrong. He who despises correction is a fool, and I don't want to be a fool. So please do correct. So free will can exist and a plan can exist. They both can coexist without one conflicting with the other. God never forces you to do a thing. He punishes you to make you wiser, because any father disciplines their child to teach them to behave themselves for their own embetterment, not out of hatred but out of love, because that child's otherwise going to become a fool. A fool despises correction. But a loving father must correct the foolish child, or else the foolish child's going to grow up to be miserable, because a fool can only beget misery for themselves and everyone around them. When the blind lead the blind, they fall into a pit. That's a proverb in the Bible. So a fool is going to fall into a pit. I mean, it's just going to be sad, their outcome. So God's always trying to help us to be wiser. He's giving us biblical books. He's even all the offshoot of the Bible. Every offshoot of it is a biblical book. It's based on the Bible with certain people's interpretations tampering with things that are making it inaccurate. But every single religion is rooted in the Bible. It's just an inaccurate clone. So what I'm telling you is you do have free will, and God's plan is merely to make sure that he steers you to a good outcome in the end. But he wants to let you figure things out on your own to some extent, and he's going to try to give you wisdom, but if you're too arrogant, you're not going to listen. He's going to even then try to punish you when you're getting way off course. And if you're too dumb and arrogant, you're still not going to listen. So sometimes, no matter how hard God tries, you're too stubborn to listen to anything, and then he just lets you destroy yourself. And he's sad, but you just cannot receive any correction. He just cannot get through to you. And if he spoke to you with an audible voice and you're that stupid and ignorant, you would believe you imagined it, and you would believe that it was a hallucination, and it would leave you in a worse place than before. Because now, not only are you an utter and absolute fool and raving lunatic that has no hope and despair and is a destruction and damage to everyone around you, but now to add on to that, you're convinced you're crazy to the uttermost and there's no hope for you, and you start babbling nonsense and end up in a Looney Tunes asylum. So God can't speak to you directly or indirectly or through messages, punishments, lessons, nothing. So there is no possible way for God to teach you except to let you destroy yourself utterly, die, come before his throne, see him, be judged, be cast into outer darkness without a body, to now think for possibly millions of years, or just a short time if you're kind of not that deluded. But that somebody that deluded is going to need to think for a longer time and time out. You're just in time out. So while you're in time out, you're going to be thinking things through, knowing now God's real and he loves you. But you're still going to be like, but does he love me? But, and you're just going to be thinking with no distractions, just by yourself, not harming anyone. You're going to be thinking. You're going to be crying. You're going to be mad. You're going to be confused. But you're going to be thinking. And eventually, oh, you know what? That makes sense. Okay, and that makes sense. And you're going to start piecing things together. And then eventually you're going to become enlightened and able to then come back by your own accord. You're just going to walk back to God and say, God, I get it now, and you love me, and everything's cool. I'm not anymore in darkness. I'm walking into your light, and you're going to put the past behind you. You're going to come join the family of God. And that's the ultimate end of everyone. But for the fool, there's just nothing God can do at that point. It's impossible. So he just lets it all play out in the fullness of time, until God becomes all things in all things, which is a Bible verse. Christ will become all things in all things. So that's a proof of what I just said. You cannot claim he is all things in all things if he's not in people in hell burning for all of eternity. That doesn't make sense. So either he's becoming all things in all things, or he's not. You can't say he's all things in all things. God can't be in people while they're his enemy in hell. That makes no sense. So I don't even want to go there, because it's such a stupid argument that it's going to make me stupid just trying to even go further than to say that it is self-evident that is a fallacy, and everyone that's being honest with himself knows that.